Victorian England, 1898, where a debt became destiny. She never imagined that one desperate night would lead her to the arms of the man society feared most. Scarlett Bennet, widowed and drowning in debts she never made, travelled through a winter storm to beg mercy from the Ice Duke. But Oliver Hawthorne did not offer mercy. He offered her something far more dangerous, a bargain, her body for his heir. One night to erase £50,000. She accepted, believing it would be simple, transactional, forgettable. She was wrong, because what began as a cold arrangement became the most passionate love either had ever known. The ink was still wet when Scarlett Bennet's hands began to tremble. She stood alone in the study of Ashbourne Hall, the room where her late husband had spent countless nights losing fortunes he did not possess. The lamplight flickered against mahogany walls that had witnessed 3 generations of Bennets, and now, it seemed, would witness the last. Outside, December wind clawed at the windows like something desperate to get in. Or perhaps, Scarlett thought with grim humour, desperate to escape what was coming. The letter lay on the desk before her, its message brutally simple. Harrow and Sons, solicitors, final notice, £50,000, due in 30 days. Failure to remit will result in immediate seizure of property and assets. £50,000. The sum was impossible, grotesque. A mountain of debt built one card game at a time by a man who had stopped seeing her as a wife years before he stopped breathing. Charles Bennet had gambled away their future with the same casual indifference he had shown their marriage. And now, 3 years after his death, his ghost was taking everything that remained. Scarlett pressed her palm flat against the desk, steadying herself. She was 26 years old. She had survived a loveless marriage, buried a husband who never loved her, and kept this crumbling estate alive through sheer force of will. She would not crumble now. But God, she was tired. The door creaked open behind her. Scarlett swept the letter into the desk drawer with practiced speed, turning with a smile she did not feel. Grace stood in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl that seemed to swallow her slight frame. At 20, Scarlett's younger sister still possessed the ethereal quality of a pre-Raphaelite painting, all auburn curls and luminous eyes. But those eyes were shadowed with the chronic exhaustion that came with fragile lungs and a constitution that had never quite recovered from the scarlet fever of their childhood. "I heard you come in," Grace said softly, moving into the room with careful steps. "The post arrived?" "Nothing of consequence," Scarlett lied, the words coming easily now. She had become an expert in merciful deceptions. "Just household accounts. The butcher is being tedious about payment again." Grace's brow furrowed. "Are we truly in such dire straits?" "Nothing I cannot manage." Scarlett crossed to her sister, taking her cold hands and chafing them gently. "You should be resting. The evening air is damp." "I cannot paint if I am always resting." "You cannot paint if you are ill either." Scarlett guided her toward the door. "Come, I will have Mrs. Pemberton bring tea to your room. The good Ceylon, not the cheap blend." Grace allowed herself to be led, but her eyes remained troubled. "Scarlett, if there is something wrong—" "There is nothing wrong that a stern conversation with tradesmen cannot fix." Another lie. Another stone added to the wall she had built between her sister and the truth. "Now go. Rest. Let me worry about the tedious business of keeping this house running." When Grace had disappeared up the stairs, Scarlett returned to the study and locked the door behind her. She pulled the letter from the drawer and read it again, though the words had already burned themselves into her memory. £50,000, 30 days. She had already sold everything of value, the artwork, the silver, her mother's jewellery, except for a simple gold locket she could not bear to part with. She had dismissed servants until only old Mrs. Pemberton and her equally ancient husband remained. She had worn the same 3 mourning dresses for 3 years, turning and mending them until the fabric grew thin. There was nothing left to sell except the hall itself, and that she would not do, could not do. Ashbourne had been in the Bennet family for 5 generations. More importantly, it was the only home Grace had ever known, the only place where the air was clean enough for her damaged lungs. Scarlett's gaze fell to the bottom of the letter, where the largest creditor was listed in neat script. Oliver Hawthorne, Duke of Ravenshire, £35,000. The Ice Duke, She had never met him, but she knew his reputation. Everyone did. He had built his fortune from ruins, transforming neglected estates into profitable enterprises through methods that earned him respect and fear in equal measure. He was ruthless in business, unmoved by sentiment. There were whispers of a broken engagement years ago, after which he had retreated to his northern castle and emerged colder than ever. Men like him did not forgive debts. Men like him did not bend. But perhaps, Scarlett thought, pressing her hand to the locket at her throat, men like him might negotiate. It was a desperate hope. A foolish hope. But it was the only hope she had. She pulled a sheet of writing paper toward her and began to compose a letter requesting an audience with the Duke of Ravensshire. Her hand was steady now, her mind clear with the crystalline focus that came when there were no choices left to make. 3 days later, a reply arrived. Not a letter, but a calling card with a single line written on the back in bold black ink. "Come to Ravensshire Castle. I will see you. O.H. No date, no time, no pleasantries. Just a command, dressed as an invitation." Scarlett stood in the front hall of Ashbourne, the calling card in one hand and a small travelling case in the other. Through the window she could see the hired carriage waiting, its driver hunched against the cold. Snow had begun to fall, early for December, even in the north. Mrs. Pemberton hovered anxiously nearby. "My lady, surely you cannot travel in such weather. The roads to the north are treacherous in winter." "I have no choice, Mrs. Pemberton." Scarlett pulled on her gloves, the leather worn smooth at the fingertips. "This cannot wait. But His Grace the Duke, he has such a reputation. They say he is without mercy. Then I shall have to hope he possesses something better than mercy." Scarlett met the older woman's worried gaze. "I need him to possess reason." She climbed into the carriage without looking back at the hall, afraid that if she did, her resolve would crumble. As the wheels began to turn and the familiar outline of Ashbourne faded into the swirling snow, Scarlett touched the locket at her throat. It was warm from her skin, the small weight of it a reminder of better days. She had no idea what waited for her at Ravensshire Castle, no idea how she would convince a man famous for his cold heart to show compassion to the widow of a wastrel. But she would find a way. She had to. Because the alternative, the one she refused to consider, was watching Grace slowly freeze to death in a house they no longer owned, coughing herself into an early grave while Scarlett stood helpless. No, she would not allow it. The carriage lurched over a rut in the road. Snow fell faster now, covering the world in white. And somewhere ahead, beyond the storm, waited the Ice Duke and whatever fate he had prepared for a desperate widow with nothing left to lose but her pride. That, Scarlett thought grimly, she was prepared to sacrifice as well. If he would only listen, if he would only bend. If. The storm worsened as the carriage pushed north through the moorlands. Scarlett had travelled for 2 days, watching the gentle snow of Ashbourne transform into a white fury that battered the windows and buried the roads. By the second evening, ice coated everything. The driver shouted warnings about shelter and impossible conditions, but Scarlett refused to stop. Desperation made her reckless. When Ravensshire Castle finally emerged from the blizzard, it looked carved from the moor itself. Dark stone walls rose against the storm, ancient and imposing. Torches burned along the entrance, their flames whipped horizontal by the wind. Scarlett stepped down from the carriage on trembling legs. Snow plastered her cloak and face instantly. Her best morning dress, elegant once but now worn and carefully mended, clung damply to her frozen body. The wind destroyed any pretense of dignity. The massive door opened before she could knock. A butler appeared, impassive despite her bedraggled state. "Mrs. Bennet, His Grace is expecting you." The warmth inside struck her like a physical blow. Instead of Gothic severity, she found an entrance hall glowing with firelight, dark wood paneling, deep burgundy tapestries, heavy furniture built for comfort. A fire roared in a hearth large enough to stand in. "His Grace has been monitoring the storm," the butler said, helping remove her soaked cloak. "He was concerned you would attempt the journey. Tea will be sent to the library immediately." Concerned. The word seemed wrong for the Ice Duke. The library door opened onto warmth that made Scarlett's eyes sting. Floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with leather volumes. Windows showing only white fury outside, fire burning high, and at the desk the Duke of Devonshire himself. Oliver Hawthorne was not what she had expected, not elderly, not pinched. Instead, a man in his late 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched grey at the temples. Handsome in a severe way, all strong angles and focused intensity. But his eyes arrested her completely. Grey as the storm outside, turbulent beneath careful control. He looked at her with an expression she could not read, something that might have been recognition, though they had never met. "Mrs. Bennet, you are either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish to travel in such weather." Scarlett lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed. "I am remarkably desperate, Your Grace. Desperation makes fools of us all." Something flickered in those grey eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or respect. "Sit before you collapse. I dislike unnecessary drama." Despite everything, her lips twitched. She sank into the offered chair near the fire, heat almost painful against her frozen skin. Oliver poured brandy into crystal and brought it to her without ceremony. "Drink it." The first sip burned down her throat, spreading warmth through her chest. She took another, larger. "Easy. I need you conscious for this conversation." Tea arrived. Oliver dismissed the maid and poured himself, adding sugar without asking. Somehow he had guessed correctly that she needed sweetness. They sat in silence while life returned to her frozen limbs. She felt his gaze taking in details she wished were less obvious. Worn fabric, careful mending, gloves darned more than once. "You received my letter," she said finally. "I did. £50,000 is considerable. It is not my debt. It was my late husband's. Yet, as his widow, it falls to you. That is the law. A cruel law, perhaps, but law nonetheless." He leaned back, watching her with unnerving intensity. "Tell me, Mrs. Bennet, why should I forgive this debt? What makes you different from others who have sat in that chair begging for mercy?" Scarlett met his gaze directly. "I do not beg for mercy, Your Grace. I am asking for business terms." His eyebrow rose. "Business terms? Yes, I am willing to work. I have kept Ashbourne running for 3 years with almost no resources. I understand estate management, account books, tenant relations. I can—" "Mrs. Bennet," his voice cut through gently but firmly, "I do not need an estate manager." "Then there must be something else, some service that would be valuable enough to—" "There is." The words hung between them. Scarlett's breath caught. Oliver stood and moved to the window, back to her as he watched the storm. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "I am the last of my line unless I produce an heir within 9 years. There is an entailment. Without a legitimate son, everything goes to my cousin, a man I despise." Scarlett's fingers tightened on the chair arms. She sensed more coming. "I do not wish to marry. I have no interest in courtship theatre, in managing a duchess and her expectations, in pretending affection I do not feel. I tried that once. It ended badly." He turned, and the look in his eyes made her pulse quicken. "But I do need an heir. And you, Mrs. Bennet, need £50,000. Understanding crashed over her like cold water. She stood abruptly, chair scraping. "Your Grace, if you are suggesting—" "I am suggesting a business arrangement." His voice remained level, but intensity sharpened his expression. "Give me an heir. If you conceive within 3 months, your debt is forgiven entirely. If not, half is forgiven, and you return to Ashbourne with no further obligation. You are asking me to prostitute myself. I am asking you to engage in a mutually beneficial transaction. You need money you do not have. I need a child without marriage complications. It is pragmatic. It is insulting. Is it more insulting than watching your sister freeze to death in a house you cannot heat?" His words were brutal in their accuracy. "I know about Grace, 20 years old with damaged lungs. I know you have sold everything to keep her warm. I know you lie to protect her from worry." Tears burned behind Scarlett's eyes. "You investigated me. I investigate everyone who owes me money. Good business." He paused, voice softening fractionally. "I am not a monster. I am simply a man facing an impossible situation and offering you a way out of yours. By reducing me to breeding stock. By offering you a choice." His jaw tightened. "You can refuse. Walk out tonight, find shelter at the village inn, return home. I will not pursue the debt immediately. You have until spring, or you can accept my terms and save everything, your home, your sister's health, your family's legacy. He withdrew a document from his desk. My solicitor drew this up. Fair terms, I believe. If you conceive, debt forgiven and a trust established for the child. If not, half forgiven regardless. You are bound to discretion, no one can ever know. Scarlett's mind raced. This was madness, scandalous beyond measure. Discovery would destroy her reputation completely, but Grace would be warm, safe, able to breathe without fear. I need time to think, she whispered. Of course, but not much, the storm worsens. He set the document down. I have prepared a room. Rest. Eat. When you are ready, we will discuss further. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it is worth, Mrs. Bennet, I do not make this offer lightly, nor without respect for what I am asking. You may think me cold, calculating, heartless. Perhaps I am, but I am honest, and I keep my word. Then he was gone. Scarlett moved to the window and pressed her forehead against cold glass. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, her heart hammered with something that might have been fear, or might have been something far more dangerous. Tomorrow, she would decide. Tonight, she would try not to think about the strange heat that had bloomed when the Duke's grey eyes met hers across the firelit room. Try, and likely fail. Scarlett did not sleep. The room Oliver had prepared was luxurious, velvet-draped bed, steady fire, every comfort money could provide. But comfort could not quiet her racing mind. She paced before the windows, watching snow accumulate. Her reflection stared back, pale and hollow. A woman at a precipice. Give me an air, clinical, businesslike, as if her body were simply another asset to negotiate. Yet pragmatism whispered its cold truths. He was right about Grace, right about the house, right about everything she stood to lose. She thought of Charles. Her late husband had taken her body as his right, with no tenderness, quick, mechanical. She had been a duty, nothing more. And now another man proposed the same. Different terms, honest, at least, but fundamentally the same reduction. What choice did she have? Dawn came grey and bitter. Scarlett dressed in yesterday's damp clothes and braided her hair with trembling fingers. Oliver sat in the breakfast room, reading correspondence. He looked up as she entered, expression softening fractionally. You did not sleep? No. Scarlett accepted coffee, wrapping her hands around the warmth. I spent the night considering your proposal. Oliver dismissed the servants. And? I have terms of my own. Scarlett met his gaze steadily. If we are to engage in this transaction, it will be on my conditions as well. Interest flickered across his face. Go on. One night. Her voice remained level despite the heat climbing her neck. I spoke of 3 months, repeated attempts. I will not agree to that, one night only. If there is a child, your debt is forgiven. If not, you forgive half, and we never speak of this again. Oliver leaned back, studying her. You understand that one night significantly reduces the probability. I understand mathematics. I also understand that I will not become your mistress for 3 months, subjected to repeated summons. One night. Those are my terms. Silence stretched. Scarlett forced herself not to look away. Why? Oliver asked finally. If you are willing to accept the arrangement at all, why limit yourself to the option least likely to succeed? Because I need to be able to live with myself afterward. The words came out raw. Because I have already spent years as a transaction in a loveless marriage, I will not spend months in the same position again. Something shifted in Oliver's expression. Understanding or respect. One night reduces your chances considerably. Then that is what I accept, but I walk away with my dignity intact. Oliver moved to the window. Snow continued falling. When he spoke, his voice was quieter. My former fiancée used to say I had no understanding of dignity, that I reduced everything to numbers. Perhaps she was right. He turned to face her. Very well, Mrs. Bennet. One night. Your terms. Relief and terror crashed over her equally. When? Not tonight. You are exhausted. He moved to the desk. "There is a hunting lodge on my property, Glenmere, more private. I will have it prepared 1 week from today." 1 week. It gives you time to return to Ashbourne, to settle affairs, to ensure Grace is cared for. He began writing. "You will tell her you are consulting with solicitors, whatever story seems plausible." Scarlett watched his long fingers move with practiced ease. She noticed the slight silver in his dark hair, the way his jaw tightened, the breadth of his shoulders. He was handsome, but she had not allowed herself to consider what it might mean to share a bed with him. Her breath caught. Oliver glanced up, and their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. The air thickened, charged. Heat crept up her throat. Oliver's gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered, then returned to her eyes. "Are you frightened?" he asked quietly. "Yes." "Of me? Of everything this means?" Oliver crossed to stand before her. Not touching, but close. She could smell sandalwood and something distinctly him. "I will not hurt you, that much I promise." "I know." And strangely she did. "My late husband was never cruel, simply indifferent. I'm not certain which is worse." "I will not be indifferent." The words hung weighted. She stepped back, needing distance. "I should return to Ashbourne. I will have my carriage prepared." Oliver completed the document. "These are the revised terms. Read carefully. If you agree, sign." Scarlett read through the precise legal language. 1 night. Conception resulting in full debt forgiveness and trust for the child. No conception resulting in half forgiveness. Complete discretion required. She signed her name. The scratch of pen seemed impossibly loud. Oliver witnessed her signature, then locked the document away. 1 week. I will send my carriage to collect you. Pack lightly. How long? 1 night, as you specified. Perhaps the day following, depending on weather. He paused. If you wish to leave immediately after, I will arrange it. Scarlett nodded, not trusting her voice. This was happening. In 1 week, she would share a bed with the Duke of Ravenshire, a man she had met less than 24 hours ago, a man whose grey eyes seemed to see through every defence. The journey back passed in a blur. Oliver's carriage was superior, well-sprung and warm, with heated bricks and thick furs, but comfort could not quiet her tumult. She had agreed, signed her name to terms that would scandalize anyone. She was going to give herself to a man for money, yet it did not feel as sordid as it should. Oliver had been respectful, direct, yes, calculating, but not dismissive of her dignity. He had even accepted her counteroffer, knowing it reduced his chances. Why? Scarlett pressed her hand against the locket at her throat. Her mother had worn this, her grandmother before that, women who had made difficult choices in desperate times. Ashbourne appeared through thinning snow, familiar and beloved. Home. Tears pricked her eyes as the carriage rolled up the drive. Grace met her at the door, wrapped in shawls, face bright with relief. "Scarlett, thank God you are home safely." "I am fine." Scarlett embraced her sister, breathing lavender scent. "Everything is fine." "Did you settle matters with the creditors?" "I did. It is arranged. We will keep the house." Grace pulled back, searching her face. "What did you have to promise?" "Nothing you need worry about." Another lie. "Simply some consulting work. Estate management advice." She hated lying to Grace, hated the ease with which deception now flowed, but the truth was impossible. That night, Scarlett lay in her own bed staring at the ceiling. 1 week, 7 days until everything changed. She touched her stomach, flat beneath her nightgown, tried to imagine it swelling with child, Oliver's child. But beneath the clinical analysis, beneath shame and fear, something else stirred, something that had awakened when Oliver's eyes met hers, when his gaze had dropped to her mouth with unmistakable awareness. He had said he would not be indifferent. Scarlett closed her eyes and tried not to wonder what that meant, tried not to imagine strong hands and grey eyes and heat that had nothing to do with obligation. 7 days. She would not think about it until then. She would fail, of course, but she would try. The week passed both too quickly and not quickly enough. Scarlett moved through her days at Ashbourne in a strange fog. She reviewed accounts, She sat with Grace while her sister painted. She walked the grounds, checking tenant cottages. But her mind was always elsewhere, always counting down. 6 days. 5 days. 4. Grace noticed something was different. You seem distracted. Are you certain everything is settled? Quite certain. Scarlett kept her voice light. I am simply tired. You have not told me much about the Duke. What manner of man is he? Scarlett's hands stilled. He is pragmatic, fair, not the monster his reputation suggests. Is he handsome? Heat crept up her neck. I suppose some might think so. It is not relevant. Grace smiled knowingly. You are blushing. He must be very handsome indeed. If only Grace knew how much Scarlett had noticed. The breadth of Oliver's shoulders, the way his grey eyes seemed to see through her, the timbre of his voice when he said, I will not be indifferent. I have work to do, Scarlett said, standing abruptly. She fled before Grace could ask more questions. The letter arrived on the 6th day, Oliver's precise handwriting. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. The carriage will collect you. Pack for 1 night. Bring nothing elaborate. Scarlett read it 3 times, then burned it. No evidence. No trail. That night, she barely slept. She lay in darkness, hands pressed to her stomach, wondering if this time tomorrow she would be carrying a child. Oliver's child. Except it did not feel entirely cold anymore. Something had shifted. Some current had passed between them. He had looked at her mouth. She had noticed the strength in his hands. What did that mean? The morning of departure, Scarlett told Grace she would be gone for 2 days. Business with solicitors in York, finalizing settlement arrangements. Grace hugged her. Travel safely. I will miss you. More than you know, Scarlett thought, because after tomorrow I will be changed. Oliver's carriage arrived precisely at 2. Scarlett had packed 1 small case, a nightgown, plain and practical, a change of clothes, her mother's locket, nothing elaborate. The drive to Glenmere took less than an hour. The lodge sat in wooded hills, surrounded by bare winter trees, smaller than Ravenshire Castle, built of warm stone with smoke rising from chimneys, welcoming rather than imposing. Oliver met her at the door himself. No servants in sight. He looked different, less formal. He wore shirt sleeves and a waistcoat. His cravat was loosened. He looked almost approachable. Mrs. Bennet, he took her case. You made good time. The roads were clear. Scarlett stepped inside, grateful for warmth. This is lovely. I have always preferred it to the castle. Less oppressive. He gestured toward the main room. Come, I have prepared tea. We need not rush anything. The interior was comfortable rather than grand. A sitting room with deep chairs before a massive fireplace, bookshelves with well-worn volumes, windows overlooking forest, a table set with tea and simple food, no hunting trophies, no ostentation, just quiet warmth. You are surprised, Oliver observed. I expected something more formal. This is where I come when I want to be myself. He poured tea with careful attention. Sugar? Yes, thank you. They sat across from each other, fire crackling between them. Scarlett was intensely aware of everything. The firelight in Oliver's dark hair, the strength in his hands, the fact that somewhere in this lodge was a bedroom where, tonight, they would... She pushed the thought away. Not yet. Tell me about your husband, Oliver said quietly. Your marriage. Scarlett looked up, startled. Why would you want to know that? Because I'm about to be intimate with you. Because despite the clinical nature of our arrangement, I would prefer to understand what you have experienced. He met her gaze steadily. You do not have to answer, but I am asking. Scarlett set down her teacup. Charles married me for my dowry. I married him because my father arranged it. He was not cruel, simply indifferent. He came to my bed when he deemed it necessary. He was quick, mechanical. He would finish and leave without speaking. Her voice had gone flat. After 2 years with no child, he stopped coming altogether. He spent his time gambling. I spent mine managing the estate he was destroying. When he died, I felt relief more than grief. Then guilt for feeling relieved. Oliver's jaw had tightened. Something dark flickered in his grey eyes. He was a fool. He was a product of his upbringing. That does not excuse treating you as an inconvenience." Oliver leaned forward. "Scarlett. May I call you Scarlett?" The use of her first name sent an unexpected shiver through her. "Yes. What happened with your husband was not intimacy. It was selfishness, dressed as marital duty." His voice lowered, became gentle. "I will not treat you that way. I cannot promise romance or love, but I can promise attention, consideration. Your experience matters to me." Scarlett's breath caught. "Why?" "Because you deserve better than what you have known. And because this arrangement, clinical as it may be, does not have to be unpleasant for you." Something in Scarlett's chest loosened, a tension she had not realized she was carrying. "You are kinder than your reputation suggests. Do not tell anyone. It would ruin my standing entirely." A slight smile touched his lips, the first she had seen from him. Scarlett found herself smiling back. "Your secret is safe." The afternoon passed more easily than anticipated. They talked about books which they both loved, about estate management where their philosophies aligned, about nothing and everything. Oliver showed her the small library, pointing out favorite volumes. He listened when she spoke about Grace's art. He asked questions that suggested genuine interest rather than obligation. This man, Scarlett thought, was not what she had expected at all. As evening approached, a simple dinner appeared: cold chicken, fresh bread, wine that Oliver poured for both of them. "I gave the staff the evening off," he explained. "Complete privacy as agreed. There is no one here but us." Scarlett's pulse quickened. The sun was setting. Night was coming, and with it, the fulfillment of their bargain. Oliver seemed to sense her tension. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. His palm was warm, calloused in a way that suggested he did not leave all physical work to servants. "We do not have to do anything tonight if you are not ready. The agreement states one night, but it does not specify when. If you need more time—" "No!" Scarlett's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I am ready, or as ready as I will ever be." Oliver studied her face for a long moment. Then he stood and offered his hand. "Come with me." Scarlett placed her hand in his and let him lead her upstairs. The bedroom glowed with warmth. Scarlett had braced herself for something cold, impersonal. Instead, she found a room designed for tenderness. Fire burning steadily, walls papered in soft cream, the bed draped in deep burgundy piled with pillows, candles flickering, their light gentle. It looked like a place designed for intimacy rather than transaction. Oliver released her hand and moved to tend the fire, giving her space. "There is a dressing screen if you would like privacy, or I can step out." Scarlett's throat had gone dry. "Will you turn away while I undress?" "Of course." Oliver turned his back without hesitation. "Take whatever time you need." Her hands trembled as she unbuttoned her dress. The fabric whispered as it fell. She stood in her chemise and corset, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was about to become. "May I help with your corset?" Oliver's voice came quietly, still facing away. "The laces can be difficult alone." "Yes, thank you." He turned slowly. His eyes met hers first, holding her gaze before assessing the task. Nothing lascivious in his look, simply attention. His fingers found the laces at her back working methodically. His knuckles brushed her spine through the thin chemise. Scarlett shivered, though not from cold. "Are you frightened?" he asked softly. "Yes, but not of you." "Then what frightens you?" Scarlett searched for words. "That I will disappoint you, that this will hurt, that it will be like before, and I will feel nothing but the desire for it to be over." The laces went slack. Oliver's hands stilled, then gently turned her to face him. His grey eyes were intense in the candlelight. "Scarlett, listen carefully. This is not like before. I am not your late husband. And if at any point you want to stop, we stop. Do you understand? Your consent can be withdrawn at any moment." Something in her chest eased. "You would stop? Even though we have an agreement?" "The agreement is meaningless if you are suffering through it." His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I want you willing, present. If that is not possible tonight, then we wait." Scarlett leaned into his touch. His hand was warm, solid, real. "I do not want to wait. I simply do not know what to expect." "Then let me show you." His voice had dropped lower. "May I kiss you?" The question surprised her. Charles had never asked. Yes. Oliver's lips met hers gently, not demanding, exploring. His mouth was soft, careful, asking rather than taking. Scarlett found herself leaning closer, her hands resting on his chest. She could feel his heartbeat strong and steady. The kiss deepened gradually. His tongue traced her lower lip, seeking entrance. She opened for him, and the intimacy made her gasp. His hand slid into her hair, cradling her head. His other arm wrapped around her waist, drawing her close until their bodies pressed together. Heat bloomed where they touched. Scarlett could feel the hard planes of his chest, could smell sandalwood and something earthier. Her fingers clutched at his waistcoat, anchoring herself. When Oliver pulled back, they were both breathing hard. That, he murmured against her lips, is how it should begin, with wanting rather than obligation. I did not know it could feel like that. There is much you do not know. Much I want to show you. His hand traced down her arm. But only if you want to continue. I do. And she meant it. The fear had transformed into anticipation, curiosity, a strange hunger she had never felt before. Oliver led her to the bed, movements unhurried. He sat on the edge and drew her to stand between his knees. His hands settled on her hips, thumbs stroking small circles through the thin chemise. "Tell me what your husband did," he said quietly, "so I know what not to repeat." Scarlett flushed. He would push me onto the bed, lift my nightgown, enter me quickly, finish quickly, and leave. No kissing. No touching beyond what was necessary. Oliver's jaw tightened. Then we will do everything differently. He stood and began unbuttoning his waistcoat, shrugging it off. Then his shirt, pulling it over his head. Scarlett stared at the expanse of his chest, the defined muscles of his shoulders and arms. A scar ran along his ribs. "You are allowed to look," he said, amusement in his voice. "You are allowed to touch if you wish." Tentatively, Scarlett reached out. Her fingertips traced the line of his collarbone down to his chest. His skin was warm, slightly rough. She felt him draw in a sharp breath when her palm flattened over his heart. "You are beautiful," she whispered. "Men are not beautiful." "You are. To me, you are." Something shifted in his expression. He caught her hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her palm. "You undo me, Scarlett Bennett." Then he was kissing her again, deeper, more urgent. His hands found the hem of her chemise and lifted it slowly. She raised her arms, allowing him to pull it over her head. For the first time since her wedding night, she stood completely bare before a man. Oliver's gaze traveled over her slowly, appreciating. "You are exquisite." He laid her back on the bed with such gentleness it made her throat tight. He stretched out beside her, his hand beginning a slow exploration of her body. His fingers traced her collarbone, dipped into the hollow of her throat, skimmed down to cup her breast with reverent care. When his thumb brushed her nipple, Scarlett gasped. "You are responsive," Oliver murmured. "That is good. Your body knows pleasure, even if your mind has forgotten it." He lowered his head and took her nipple into his mouth. Scarlett's back arched, a sound escaping her that she had never made before. His tongue circled while his hand attended to her other breast, building heat that pooled low in her belly. "Oliver," she breathed. "I know." His lips trailed lower, kissing down her ribs, her stomach. "Trust me." His hand slid between her thighs and Scarlett tensed. "Easy," he soothed, his touch light and careful. "I will not hurt you. I am going to make you ready for me." His fingers explored gently, finding wetness that made him groan. "You are already so responsive." He stroked her with maddening patience, finding places that made her gasp, building sensation until she was trembling. When his fingers slipped inside her, she cried out in pleasure. "That is it," he encouraged. "Let yourself feel it." He worked her slowly, thoroughly. His thumb found a spot that made stars burst behind her eyes. The sensation built and built, coiling tighter, until it released in a wave so intense she sobbed his name. Oliver held her through it, murmuring praise. When she finally stilled, he kissed her temple. That is what it should feel like, and we have barely begun. He removed his remaining clothes, then returned to the bed. He settled between her thighs, his weight supported on his forearms. "Look at me," he commanded gently. "I want to see your eyes." She met his gaze as he positioned himself. When he entered her, it was slow and careful. He watched her face for any sign of pain, stopping to let her adjust. There was pressure, fullness, but not discomfort. "Breathe," he reminded her. "You are doing beautifully." When he was fully seated, he stilled. Then he began to move, slow, measured strokes that gradually built in intensity. His eyes never left hers. One hand cradled her face while the other gripped her hip. "Scarlet," he breathed, her name a prayer. "You feel extraordinary." She wrapped her legs around his waist, changing the angle. They both groaned. Oliver's control began to fray, his movements becoming less measured, more desperate. His hand slipped between their bodies, finding that spot again. The combination was overwhelming. The pleasure built, faster this time, until it crested in a wave that stole her breath. She felt Oliver's rhythm stutter, felt him bury himself deep with a groan. Warmth flooded inside her as he found his release. They lay tangled together afterward, both breathing hard. Oliver's weight pressed her into the mattress, solid and real. She could feel his heartbeat against her chest. When he finally moved, it was to roll onto his back and pull her against his side. She went willingly, her head resting on his chest. "Sleep," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "We have until morning." Scarlet closed her eyes, feeling more content than she had in years. Whatever happened next, she would not regret it. For the first time in her life, she had known true intimacy. Dawn crept through the windows, painting the room in shades of pearl and gold. Scarlet woke slowly, cocooned in warmth. For a moment, she could not remember where she was. Then awareness returned in a rush. The lodge. Oliver. The night they had shared. She was alone in the bed. Panic fluttered briefly before she heard movement from across the room. Oliver stood by the window, dressed in trousers and an open shirt, looking out at the snow-covered forest. His back was to her, but something in his posture suggested he had been standing there for some time. Scarlet pulled the coverlet around herself and sat up. The movement drew his attention. He turned, and the look in his grey eyes made her breath catch. Not cold, not distant, something warmer, something that might have been wonder. "Good morning," she said softly, suddenly uncertain. "Good morning." Oliver crossed to the bed and sat on the edge, close enough to touch but not touching. "How do you feel?" The question was simple, but the concern behind it was not. Scarlet considered lying, offering some polite response. But after what they had shared, dishonesty seemed impossible. "Different," she said finally. "Changed, but not in a way that frightens me." Something in Oliver's expression eased. "I did not hurt you?" "No, you did not hurt me." She met his eyes. "You showed me something I did not know existed. Something I thought was reserved for novels and foolish girls who believed in romance." Oliver reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "It was not what I expected either." "What did you expect?" "A transaction, clinical, necessary but forgettable." His thumb traced her jawline. "It was none of those things." Scarlet's heart hammered. "What was it then?" "I do not have words for it yet." His hand dropped, but his gaze held hers. "I have been standing at that window for an hour, trying to understand what happened last night, trying to reconcile it with what I believed this arrangement to be." "And have you reconciled it?" "No." The admission seemed to cost him. "I find I do not want to. I find I want to keep it separate from the cold calculation that brought us here, to let it exist as something else entirely." Scarlet understood. She felt the same confusion, the same need to protect what they had shared from being reduced to mere terms and conditions. "What happens now?" "Now we have breakfast. Then if you wish, you return to Ashbourne as planned. The agreement stands. If there is a child, I will know in time. If not," he paused. "If not, then half your debt is forgiven, and we part as agreed." "And if there is a child?" Oliver's jaw tightened. "Then we will discuss what comes next. But not today. Today, I simply want to have breakfast with you and pretend, for a few hours more, that we are not bound by contracts and desperation." Scarlett found herself smiling despite the ache in her chest. "I would like that." Oliver stood and retrieved her chemise from where it had fallen the night before. He handed it to her with surprising tenderness. "I will give you privacy to dress. Come downstairs when you are ready. I have prepared food." "You cook?" "I am surprisingly capable when I choose to be." A hint of humor touched his lips. "Do not look so shocked, Mrs. Bennet. Dukes are still human despite what society would have you believe." When he had gone, Scarlett dressed slowly, her body deliciously sore in places she had never been sore before. She touched her lips, remembering his kisses, pressed her hand to her stomach, wondering if even now a child grew there. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt only a strange calm. Whatever came, she would face it. And if she faced it alone, she would at least have the memory of one perfect night. She found Oliver in the small kitchen, setting dishes on the simple wooden table. Eggs, toast, jam, tea steaming in delicate cups. Nothing elaborate, but prepared with care. "Sit," he commanded gently. "You must be hungry." She was. Ravenous, in fact. They ate in comfortable silence, the morning light streaming through the windows. It felt strangely domestic, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with what they had shared in the bedroom. "Tell me about your former fiancée," Scarlett said suddenly, surprising herself. "You mentioned her once. You said it ended badly." Oliver set down his fork, his expression shuddering slightly. But after a moment he answered, "Her name was Catherine, beautiful, accomplished, everything a duchess should be. We were engaged for 6 months. What happened? I discovered her in the library with my cousin, the same cousin who stands to inherit if I die without an heir." His voice had gone flat. They were not reading. Scarlett's hand found his across the table. "I am sorry. It was years ago. I should be over it by now. Betrayal does not follow a schedule. It lingers as long as it needs to." Oliver turned his hand over, lacing his fingers with hers. "You understand. My husband may not have betrayed me with another woman, but he betrayed me nonetheless. Every time he gambled away our future, every time he dismissed my concerns, every time he treated me as an inconvenience rather than a partner." She squeezed his hand. "So yes, I understand." They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined, sharing a silence that spoke more than words could. "I do not want you to leave," Oliver said finally, his voice rough. "I know that is not part of our agreement. I know I have no right to ask you to stay, but I do not want you to leave." Scarlett's heart clenched. "I do not want to leave either. But Grace will worry if I am gone too long, and the longer I stay, the harder it will be to go. Then we will make the most of the time we have." Oliver stood and pulled her to her feet. "Come. There is something I want to show you." He led her outside into the crisp morning air. The world was blanketed in fresh snow, pristine and untouched. Oliver walked her through the forest to a clearing where an enormous oak stood, its bare branches reaching toward the sky. "This tree is older than Ravenshire Castle," Oliver said, his breath misting in the cold air. "It has weathered storms that destroyed lesser trees. It has seen generations come and go, and it endures." Scarlett looked up at the ancient oak. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to remember that some things endure, that not everything beautiful is fragile." He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "Whatever happens next, Scarlett, I want you to know that last night meant something to me. You meant something to me. That will not change, regardless of what the future brings." Tears burned behind Scarlett's eyes. "You are making this very difficult." "Good. It should be difficult. Easy things are rarely worth remembering." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and achingly tender. The cold air bit at their faces, but neither seemed to notice. They stood beneath the ancient oak, holding each other as if they could stop time through sheer force of will. When they finally returned to the lodge, Oliver had his driver bring the carriage around. Scarlett's small case was placed inside. The moment she had been dreading had arrived. "Write to me," Oliver said as he helped her into the carriage. "Not about the arrangement, just write to me. Tell me about Grace's paintings, about the estate, about anything." "Will you write back?" "Every time." He paused, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather-bound book. "I noticed you looking at this in the library yesterday. I want you to have it." Scarlett opened the book. Poetry. Byron. She looked up at him, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "So you will think of me," he said simply. "I would think of you regardless." Oliver's hand came up to cup her face one last time. "Then think of me kindly." "Always." The carriage pulled away. Scarlett turned to look back through the window. Oliver stood in the doorway of the lodge watching her leave. He raised his hand in farewell. She pressed her palm against the glass, wishing she could touch him one more time. Then the trees closed in, and he disappeared from view. Scarlett sat back against the cushions, clutching the book of poetry to her chest. Her body still remembered his touch. Her lips still tasted his kisses, and somewhere deep inside, perhaps, a child was beginning to form. She pressed her hand to her stomach and closed her eyes. Whatever came next, she would face it. But she would face it changed, because Oliver Hawthorne, the Ice Duke, had melted something inside her that she had not known was frozen. And there was no going back to the woman she had been before. 3 months passed in a peculiar rhythm of hope and dread. Scarlett returned to Ashbourne and threw herself into estate management with renewed vigor. The money from Oliver had begun to arrive in careful installments, allowing her to pay off creditors, repair tenant cottages, and restore some measure of dignity to the crumbling manor. She told Grace the solicitors had arranged favorable terms, which was not entirely a lie. What she did not tell Grace was that she woke each morning touching her stomach, waiting for signs, hoping and fearing in equal measure. Oliver had written, as promised, short letters at first, carefully neutral, updates on his estates, questions about her management of Ashbourne. But gradually the letters grew longer, more personal. He asked about books she was reading, about Grace's latest paintings, about whether she had walked in the garden that morning, and if the roses were beginning to bud. Scarlett wrote back with equal care, never mentioning the arrangement, never speaking of what they had shared, but weaving intimacy into every sentence nonetheless. She told him about the tenant family whose roof she had repaired, about the satisfaction of watching lambs born in the spring meadows, about how Grace's health seemed improved now that the house was properly heated. And always, beneath the mundane details, an unspoken question hung between them. "Are you with child?" The answer came 6 weeks after Glenmere. Scarlett woke one morning and knew. Her courses, always reliable, had not come. Her breasts were tender, and when she stood too quickly, a wave of nausea sent her rushing for the basin. She sat on the edge of her bed, hands pressed to her still flat stomach, and felt the world shift beneath her feet. A child. Oliver's child. An heir that would save his legacy and secure her future. She should have felt triumph, relief. Instead, she felt terror, because now the arrangement was real in a way it had not been before. Now there would be a baby, a living, breathing consequence of one desperate night that had become something far more complicated than either of them had anticipated. The next envelope from Oliver arrived 3 days later. Inside, pressed between 2 sheets of paper, was a single pressed flower. Lavender, the same scent that had filled the bedroom at Glenmere. The note was brief. "I think of you constantly. I hope you are well. Oh." Scarlett stared at the dried flower for a long time. Then she wrote the letter she had been dreading. "Your Grace, the arrangement has borne fruit. I am with child. As per our agreement, the debt is forgiven in full. I will write again when the time comes. S." She sealed the letter before she could change her mind, before she could add all the things she wanted to say. That she thought of him constantly too, that she reread his letters until the paper grew soft from handling, that the night at Glenmere had changed her in ways she was still discovering. The reply came faster than she expected. Just 3 words, but written in a hand that trembled slightly. "Thank God. Oh." And beneath it, in smaller script, "May I visit?" Scarlett's hand shook as she wrote her response. "Not yet. Let me tell Grace first. Let me prepare. Give me time." She did not add that she needed time to fortify herself against seeing him again, that she was afraid of what it would mean to look into his grey eyes now that his child grew inside her. But before she could tell Grace, Before she could prepare anything, complications began. It started with spotting, just a little at first, easily dismissed. But then cramping came, sharp and frightening. The local doctor was called. He examined her with rough hands and rougher manner, pronouncing her constitution too delicate for childbearing. "Bed rest," he ordered, "complete. Any exertion could bring on early labor or worse. You are fortunate to have made it this far." Grace was distraught when she learned the truth. "Why did you not tell me? How did this happen? Who is the father?" Scarlett had prepared lies for this moment. A brief affair with a man who had left for the continent. A mistake born of loneliness. Nothing that would connect her to Oliver. "It does not matter who the father is," Scarlett said, taking her sister's hands. "What matters is that I am going to have a baby, and I need your help." But as the weeks passed and the pregnancy became more difficult, Scarlett realized she could not stay at Ashbourne. The gossip in the village had already begun, whispers behind gloved hands, speculation about the widow's sudden condition. It was only a matter of time before the scandal spread beyond their small community. More importantly, she needed to protect Oliver. If anyone connected her pregnancy to the Duke of Ravenshire, the scandal would destroy them both. The agreement would be exposed. His reputation would be shattered. She made her decision on a grey April morning, writing 2 letters. The first was to Oliver, brief and factual. "I'm leaving Ashbourne for the remainder of the pregnancy to avoid scandal. I will write when the child is born. Do not look for me. I am safe." The second was to her cousin Martha Harding, a widow who lived in Seabury Cove on the Cornish coast. Martha was practical, discreet, and owed Scarlett a favour from years past. She would provide shelter without judgment. "You are leaving." Grace's voice was small, hurt. "Leaving me? Not forever. Just until after the baby comes." Scarlett pulled her sister into an embrace. "The sea air will be good for both of us. And Martha has room you can visit once I'm settled." "Does the father know?" "He knows about the child, but we agreed it would be best if I managed this alone." It was another lie, another stone in the wall she had built between truth and survival. But it was necessary. The journey to Cornwall was brutal. Every rut in the road sent pain shooting through Scarlett's abdomen. She travelled wrapped in blankets, one hand always pressed to her stomach, willing the baby to hold on, to stay safe, to give her time. Seabury Cove was everything Ashbourne was not. Salt air and screaming gulls, fishermen's cottages clustered against the cliff, the constant roar of waves against rock. Martha's cottage sat above the harbour, small but sturdy, smelling of brine and bread. "You look half dead," Martha said bluntly, helping Scarlett inside. "When is the child due?" "Not for another 4 months, if all goes well. 4 months of bed rest in this climate." Martha shook her head. "The damp will not help, but we will manage. I have delivered half the babies in this village. I will see you through." That first week, Scarlett did nothing but rest. She lay in the small bedroom overlooking the sea and tried not to think about Oliver. Tried not to wonder if he was looking for her despite her letter. Tried not to miss him with an intensity that frightened her. She failed at all 3. On the 8th day, a package arrived. No return address, but she knew the handwriting. Inside was a shawl, impossibly soft, knitted in a pattern she recognized from his family crest. And a note, "For the baby, and for you. Be safe. Be well. I am waiting." Oh. Scarlett pressed the shawl to her face and wept for the first time since leaving Ashbourne, for the impossibility of their situation, for the child who would grow up not knowing his father, for the night that had seemed so simple and had become so desperately complicated. But beneath the tears was something else, something warm and stubborn and refusing to die. Hope. Because Oliver was waiting. And that meant, despite everything, this was not over. Not yet. Summer came to Seabury Cove with unrelenting heat and something darker. The fever arrived on a merchant ship from the Mediterranean. Within days it spread through the village like wildfire. Children sickened first, then the elderly. The local doctor was overwhelmed, working day and night as more fell ill. Martha forbade Scarlett from leaving the cottage. "You stay in that bed. The fever is deadly to women in your condition." "I have seen it before." Scarlett obeyed, though confinement was its own kind of torture. She was 7 months pregnant now, her belly enormous, her body exhausted from the effort of carrying a child while confined to bed. Every day felt like a year. Every night brought dreams of Oliver that left her aching when she woke. She had continued writing to him, though she gave no address. Short letters full of carefully chosen details. The baby moves constantly. I think he will be strong like his father. Grace visited last week and brought sketches of the sea. I am well enough. Oliver's letters came less frequently now, forwarded through a complex system Martha had arranged, but when they arrived, Scarlett read them until she could recite them from memory. I have hired investigators to find you. I know you asked me not to look, but I cannot help myself. I need to know you are safe, that you are cared for. Please, Scarlett, let me help. She never answered those pleas. Could not. Because if he found her now, saw her like this, swollen and confined and desperate, she would not have the strength to send him away again. The fever reached Martha's cottage on a Tuesday. Martha had been helping a neighboring family, nursing their sick children through the crisis. She returned home flushed and trembling, insisting she was simply overheated from the summer sun. By evening she was delirious with fever. Scarlett dragged herself from bed despite the doctor's orders. She could not let Martha suffer alone. She bathed her cousin with cool cloths, forced water down her throat, prayed with an intensity she had not felt since childhood. But on the 3rd day of Martha's illness, the cramping began. At first, Scarlett thought it was simply strain from caring for Martha. But the pains grew stronger, more regular. She recognized them with dawning horror. Labor. 2 months too early. No, she whispered, pressing both hands to her belly. No, please, not yet. It is too soon. But the baby had other plans. The labor was brutal, fast and violent, as if the child was as desperate to escape as Scarlett was to keep him safe. Martha, half conscious with fever, could offer little help. Scarlett delivered the baby herself, biting through her own lip to keep from screaming. The child emerged small and frighteningly still, a boy as she had known he would be. Tiny and perfect, and not breathing. Scarlett's heart stopped. Then, training from a lifetime on an estate took over. She turned the baby upside down and struck his back sharply. Once, twice. On the 3rd strike, he gasped and began to wail. The sound was the most beautiful thing Scarlett had ever heard. She collapsed back against the pillows, the screaming infant on her chest, tears streaming down her face. He was alive, small, but alive. His lungs worked. His heart beat against her breast. "You are a fighter," she whispered, kissing his damp head, "like your father." But the euphoria was short-lived. The baby was premature. Martha was too ill to help, and Scarlett was bleeding too heavily, the room spinning around her. She managed to wrap the baby in the shawl Oliver had sent, then placed him in the basket Martha used for mending. She tried to stand, to fetch help, but her legs gave out. The last thing she remembered was the sound of her son crying and the taste of copper in her mouth. She woke to voices, urgent, worried voices. One of them familiar in a way that made her heart clench. "Where is she? For God's sake, someone tell me where she is." "Oliver." Scarlett tried to speak, to call out, but her throat was too dry. She managed only a weak sound, but it was enough. The door burst open. Oliver stood in the doorway, looking nothing like the composed Duke she remembered. His hair was wild, his clothes travel-stained. His face was haggard with exhaustion and something that looked like terror. Their eyes met across the small room. "Scarlett." Her name came out like a prayer. He crossed to the bed in 3 long strides and dropped to his knees beside it. His hands found hers, gripping with desperate strength. "Thank God, thank God. The baby," she managed to whisper. "Where is my baby? Safe, alive. A neighbor woman is caring for him. A Mrs. Winters, I think. She said he was tiny but strong." Oliver's voice cracked. "Like his mother." Scarlett tried to sit up, but Oliver gently pushed her back. "Stay still. You have lost too much blood. The local doctor is useless, so I brought Dr. Edmonds from Thornport. He is with Martha now, but he will examine you next. How did you find me?" "The postmark on your letters. It took time, but I traced them to Seabury Cove. I arrived yesterday and have been searching every cottage. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. When I learned about the fever, about the epidemic, I thought I would lose my mind. I hired every doctor within 50 miles. I bribed half the village for information. I was prepared to tear down every door until I found you. Something in Scarlett's chest broke open. You should not have come. The scandal. Damn the scandal! Oliver's voice was fierce, his grey eyes burning with an intensity that stole her breath. Do you understand what it did to me, knowing you were alone, knowing you were carrying my child and facing God knows what dangers without anyone to protect you? I have been half mad with worry for months. We had an agreement. I was following the terms. To hell with the agreement. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her fingers with desperate tenderness. Scarlett, I have been a fool. I convinced myself this was about duty, about securing an heir. But it stopped being about that the moment I kissed you at Glenmere. Scarlett's vision blurred with tears. Oliver, do not say things you do not mean. I am tired and sick and not myself. Then let me say them when you are well. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. But know this. I am not leaving, not now, not ever, if you will have me. What are you saying? I am saying I love you, Scarlett Bennet. The words came out rough, unpracticed, as if he had never said them before and did not quite know how. I think I have loved you since you stood in my library, soaked from the storm, and refused to beg. Since you negotiated terms with me as if you were my equal, not my supplicant. Since you made me laugh at breakfast and showed me that ice can melt if the right person warms it. Scarlett sobbed, unable to help herself. You love me. Desperately. Completely. In a way that terrifies me because I have never felt it before. His hand came up to cup her face. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. You agreed to give me an heir, not your heart. But I am asking anyway. Not because of the baby, not because of any agreement, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Oliver, her hand covered his, I love you too. God help me. I have loved you since you poured me brandy and told me to sit before I collapsed. Since you asked permission to kiss me and showed me what tenderness felt like. He kissed her then, soft and careful, mindful of her weakened state. When he pulled back, tears tracked down his face. Marry me, he whispered. Not for the agreement, not for the baby. Marry me because I am asking you to, because I want to wake beside you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night, because I want to be a father to our son in truth, not just in name. Yes, the word came out without hesitation. Yes, Oliver, yes. He kissed her again, deeper this time, pouring everything he could not say into that single gesture. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. I want to see him, Scarlett said. Our son. Bring him to me. Oliver stood and went to the door, calling for Mrs. Winters. Moments later, the woman appeared carrying a tiny bundle wrapped in Oliver's shawl. Scarlett held out her arms, and Mrs. Winters placed the baby carefully in them. He was smaller than Scarlett remembered, his features delicate and perfect, dark hair like Oliver's, eyes that opened briefly, revealing grey. Oliver sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the child with an expression of wonder. He is perfect. He is ours. Scarlett looked up at him. What shall we name him? James, Oliver said immediately, after my father, and Oliver as a middle name if you approve. James Oliver Hawthorne. Scarlett tested the name. It suits him. Oliver's arm came around her shoulders, drawing her against his side. They sat together, the three of them, while beyond the window the sea crashed against the rocks, and the fever slowly released its grip on the village. Whatever scandal awaited them in London, whatever gossip would follow, Scarlett found she did not care. She had everything she needed right here. Love, family, a future that had seemed impossible just months ago. And in the end, that was worth any price. Morning came golden and soft through the cottage windows. Scarlett woke to the sound of waves and something sweeter, Oliver's voice, low and gentle, speaking to their son. She kept her eyes closed for a moment, savoring the sound. He was reading aloud, she realized. Poetry. Byron from the book he had given her months ago. She walks in beauty, like the night, Oliver murmured, his voice carrying across the small room. of cloudless climes and starry skies. Scarlett opened her eyes. Oliver sat in a chair by the window, James cradled in one arm, the book open in his other hand. Sunlight caught in his dark hair, touched with grey at the temples. He had not shaved in days, and the shadow of beard made him look younger somehow, more human, less the Ice Duke and more simply a man holding his child. He looked up and caught her watching. A smile transformed his face. "You are awake. How do you feel?" "Like I was trampled by horses, but alive." Scarlett pushed herself up against the pillows. Dr. Edmonds had declared her out of danger 2 days ago, but her body was still recovering. "How long have you been up?" "An hour, perhaps." "James woke hungry, and I did not want to disturb you." Oliver stood and crossed to the bed, settling beside her with the baby. "He has your stubbornness. He refused to settle until I read to him." Scarlett took James carefully, marveling as she always did at how tiny he was. 3 weeks old now and finally beginning to thrive. His eyes were open, grey like his father's, tracking movement with increasing focus. "He knows your voice," she said softly. "He quiets when you speak." "As do I when you speak." Oliver's hand came up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so familiar now it made her heart ache. "You look better today. More colour in your cheeks." "I feel stronger. Dr. Edmonds says I may walk outside tomorrow if the weather holds. Not too far, not too fast." Oliver's voice held the same fierce protectiveness that had characterized every day since his arrival. He had barely left her side, sleeping in a chair by her bed, helping Martha care for both Scarlett and the baby. The proud Duke had changed soiled linens without flinching, had held his son through the night when James could not settle, had bathed Scarlett's forehead with cool cloths when fever threatened. He had been in every way that mattered, exactly what she needed. "You have been here 3 weeks, Scarlett said quietly. "People will notice, questions will be asked. Let them ask." Oliver's jaw set in that stubborn line she was coming to know. "I have already sent word to my steward. The castle knows where I am. I made it clear I would not return until you were well enough to travel." "Oliver, the scandal will happen regardless of whether I stay or go. We have a child together, Scarlett, that cannot be hidden, so we might as well face it together rather than separately." He took her hand, lacing their fingers. "Unless you have changed your mind about marrying me. If you have, I will understand. I will not force you into another arrangement." Scarlett's grip tightened. "I have not changed my mind. I want to marry you, but I need you to understand what you are taking on. Grace will come with me. She has nowhere else to go, and I will not abandon her. I would expect nothing less. Grace is family. Our home is hers for as long as she wishes. And James. People will count the months. They will know he was conceived before our marriage. Then we will tell them a version of the truth." Oliver's thumb stroked across her knuckles. "That we met during your financial difficulties, that we fell in love but kept it secret because of the circumstances, that we married quietly before James was born, but delayed announcing it due to your health. It is not entirely a lie. You have thought this through. I have thought of little else for 3 weeks." He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her fingers. "I will not lose you to propriety, Scarlett. I spent too long being ruled by what society expected, by the fear of scandal and shame. I am done with that. If loving you costs me every friend I have, so be it." Tears pricked Scarlett's eyes. "When did you become so romantic?" "When I realized I could not live without you." He leaned forward and kissed her, soft and sweet. "When I understood that agreements and arrangements mean nothing compared to this. To us." James made a small sound between them, and they both laughed. Oliver took the baby and settled him against his shoulder with practiced ease. "You are good at that," Scarlett observed, "for a man who claimed to want an heir without the complications of family." "I was an idiot," Oliver patted James's back gently. "I thought I could keep my heart separate from the rest, that I could approach fatherhood as a duty rather than a joy. But then this small creature came into the world fighting for breath, and I realized I would tear down kingdoms to keep him safe." He looked at Scarlett, his grey eyes serious, "and his mother. I would tear down kingdoms for her too." The next days passed in a gentle rhythm. Martha recovered fully, regaining her tart tongue and practical manner. She took charge of the household with barely concealed amusement at watching a duke wash dishes and change nappies. "Never thought I would see the day," she muttered to Scarlett, a peer of the realm learning which end of a baby to powder. Grace arrived in the second week, bringing trunks of Scarlett's belongings and news from Ashbourne. She took one look at Oliver holding James and smiled knowingly. "So this is the mysterious father?" Grace said, embracing her sister. "He is not at all what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone cruel. Someone who would abandon you." Grace glanced at Oliver, who was showing James the view from the window. "Instead, I find a man who looks at you as if you hung the moon." "It is complicated, Grace." "Love usually is." Grace squeezed her hand. "But I have never seen you this happy, not even before Charles. So I will not question it, I will simply be grateful." Oliver overheard and crossed to them, still holding James. "You must be Grace. Scarlett has told me much about your paintings. All of it exaggerated, I am sure. She said you have an eye for light and shadow that captures truth rather than mere likeness. That sounds accurate rather than exaggerated." Oliver smiled. "I hope you will paint James when you have time. I want to remember him exactly as he is now. Small and perfect and new." Grace blinked, clearly surprised by his sincerity. "I would be honored, Your Grace." "Oliver, please, we are family now." That evening, as sunset painted the sea in shades of amber and rose, Oliver and Scarlett walked slowly along the cliff path. James was with Martha and Grace, leaving them alone for the first time in days. "I need to tell you something," Oliver said, stopping to look out over the water. "About Catherine. About what happened." Scarlett waited, giving him space to find the words. "When I discovered her with my cousin, I told myself I was angry about the betrayal. And I was. But what truly destroyed me was realizing she had never loved me, that she had agreed to marry me for the title and the money, but felt nothing for me as a man." He turned to face her. "I spent years after that convinced I was unlovable, that something in me was fundamentally cold, broken." "You are not broken," Scarlett said fiercely. "I know that now, because you looked at me and saw something worth loving, not the Duke, not the money or the title. Just me." His hand cupped her face. "You gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. The ability to feel, to hope, to believe that happy endings might be possible." Scarlett leaned into his touch. "You gave me the same gift. You showed me that intimacy could be tender, that my body could feel pleasure, that I was worthy of being cherished rather than tolerated. We saved each other," Oliver said softly. "We did." He kissed her then, deep and slow, pouring everything he felt into that single gesture. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I want to marry you properly," Oliver said. "Not a quiet arrangement, a real wedding, with Grace and James present, with vows that mean something." "Where?" "Ashbourne, if you wish. Or Ravenshire. Or here in this cottage by the sea. I do not care where, as long as you become my wife in truth." Scarlett smiled. "Ashbourne. I want to bring you home as my husband. I want to walk through those halls knowing they are ours together, that we saved them together. Then Ashbourne it shall be." Oliver pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "Thank you." "For what?" "For taking a chance on a cold man who did not know how to love, for seeing past the ice to whatever warmth remained underneath, for giving me a son and a future and a reason to believe in something beyond duty and obligation. Thank you for the same." Scarlett rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "For showing me that agreements can transform into love, that calculated arrangements can become the foundation for something real." They stood together as the sun sank into the sea, casting everything in gold. Behind them, through the cottage window, they could see Martha and Grace laughing over something James had done. Family, real and complicated and perfect in its imperfection. Oliver kissed the top of Scarlett's head. "Ready to go home?" "Yes," Scarlett said. "I am ready." Because home was no longer just a place. It was this man, this child, this impossible love that had started with desperation and ended with hope. And she was finally, gloriously, ready to claim it all. Autumn arrived at Ashbourne in shades of amber and gold. The manor looked transformed. Not just restored, but renewed. Fresh paint gleamed on window frames. The roof no longer leaked. Gardens that had been overgrown now burst with late-season roses. Tenant cottages stood solid and warm, smoke rising from repaired chimneys. But the greatest transformation was not in the building. It was in the people who would soon fill it. The wedding was planned for the first Saturday in October. Small by society standards, but that was deliberate. Oliver had been clear about his priorities. "I want people who matter," he had said, reviewing the guest list with Scarlett in the library that had once been her prison of worry. Not half of London coming to gawk and gossip, just those who will celebrate with genuine feeling. So the invitations went to carefully chosen friends, to Oliver's few trusted associates who had stood by him through years of cold reputation, to tenants from both Ashbourne and Ravenshire who had benefited from their respective reforms, to Grace's art teacher who had encouraged her talent when money was scarce, to Martha, of course, and Dr. Edmonds, who had saved both Scarlett and Martha from the fever, and to Mrs. Pemberton, who wept when she received her invitation and immediately began planning the wedding breakfast as if it were her own daughter's celebration. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and crisp. Scarlett stood before the mirror in her mother's old room, while Grace fastened the buttons on her dress. It was not white, that symbol of virginal purity she could no longer claim. Instead, she wore deep cream silk with delicate embroidery at the bodice and sleeves. Simple, elegant, honest. "You look beautiful," Grace said softly, adjusting the small coronet of autumn flowers in Scarlett's hair. Mother would have been proud. Would she? Scarlett touched the locket at her throat, the one piece of jewelry she had refused to sell. "I have broken every rule she taught me, conceived a child out of wedlock, entered into an arrangement that would scandalize every proper lady in England." "You survived," Grace met her eyes in the mirror. "You protected me. You saved our home. You found love in the most unexpected place. Mother would have understood that sometimes the rules must bend for survival." A knock sounded at the door. Martha entered, carrying James swaddled in the christening gown that had been in the Hawthorne family for generations. Oliver had insisted their son wear it, claiming James was a Hawthorne in every way that mattered. "The little lord is fed and changed and ready for his parents' wedding," Martha announced, "though I suspect he will sleep through the whole affair." Scarlett took her son, careful not to wrinkle her dress. James blinked up at her with solemn grey eyes, so like his father's. At 2 months old, he was still small but thriving. The premature birth had left him fragile, but he grew stronger each day. "Are you ready?" Grace asked. Scarlett looked at her reflection one last time. A woman transformed, not the desperate widow who had traveled through a blizzard to beg mercy from a cold duke. Not even the woman who had agreed to give her body for debt forgiveness. Someone new. Someone who had found strength in vulnerability and love in the most calculated of arrangements. "I am ready." The ceremony took place in the garden, beneath the ancient oak where Scarlett's parents had married decades before. Chairs were arranged in a semicircle. Musicians played softly. Late roses scented the air. Oliver stood at the front with the vicar, looking nothing like the Ice Duke of reputation. He wore formal attire, but his expression was anything but cold. When Scarlett appeared at the garden entrance, his face transformed. Wonder, joy, love so fierce it took her breath away. She walked toward him carrying James, with Grace at her side. No one to give her away because she was not property to be transferred. She came to Oliver as an equal, carrying their son, claiming her future with clear eyes and steady heart. When she reached him, Oliver's hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone in that gesture that had become his signature tenderness. "You are exquisite," he whispered. "You are biased." "Absolutely." He smiled. "And I have no intention of changing." The ceremony was brief. Traditional vows with one addition that Oliver had requested. When the vicar asked if anyone objected to the union, Oliver turned to address the gathered witnesses directly. "Before we continue, I want to say something." His voice carried clearly in the autumn air. "Many of you know my reputation, the Ice Duke. Cold, calculating, ruthless in business. I earned that reputation through years of choosing obligation over feeling, of protecting myself at the cost of connection." He took Scarlett's free hand. This woman changed me. She walked into my castle during a blizzard and refused to beg. She negotiated with me as an equal. She showed me that ice can melt if the right person warms it. Our beginning was unconventional. Our path was not smooth. But what we have built together is real and honest and worth celebrating. He looked at James, then back at Scarlett. I am marrying her not because society demands it. Not because of our son, though I love him more than I knew possible. I am marrying her because I choose her, every day, in every way, and I wanted all of you to witness that choice. There was silence. Then Mrs. Pemberton began to clap. Others joined until applause filled the garden. Several of the women were crying. Even some of the men looked suspiciously bright-eyed. The vicar, smiling, continued with the vows. When it came time for rings, Oliver produced 2 bands. One for Scarlett, as expected, but he also placed a signet ring with the hawthorn crest on James's tiny finger, sized for him to grow into. So you will always know you belong, Oliver said to his son. So you will never doubt you are loved and claimed, and mine. Scarlett's vision blurred with tears as Oliver slipped the wedding band onto her finger. When the vicar pronounced them married, Oliver kissed her with such tenderness that more than one person sighed audibly. The breakfast that followed was joyful rather than formal. Long tables set up on the lawn, simple food prepared with care, music and laughter, children from the tenant families playing in the grass while adults shared stories and toasts. Oliver's steward, a practical man named Harrison, stood to speak. I have served the Hawthorne family for 30 years. I watched the current Duke grow from boy to man. And I will tell you honestly, I never saw him smile until he met Mrs. Bennet. She has given him something more valuable than an heir. She has given him happiness. For that alone, I would support this union. Grace rose next, her voice soft but clear. My sister has always protected me, always put my needs before her own. It is about time someone protected her, someone put her needs first. Your Grace, you have proven yourself worthy of her. Do not forget that when life becomes difficult, I will not, Oliver promised. As evening fell and guests began to depart, Oliver and Scarlett stood at the entrance of Ashbourne Hall, James sleeping in Scarlett's arms, Grace chatting with Dr. Edmonds nearby. Are you happy? Oliver asked quietly. Scarlett leaned into his side. More than I knew possible. You? I did not know I could feel this much. For years, I convinced myself that emotional distance was strength, that caring was weakness. You taught me I was wrong. We taught each other. Scarlett looked up at him. You showed me that I deserved tenderness, that my body could feel pleasure, that love was not something reserved for heroines in novels. Oliver kissed her forehead. What happens now? Now we live. Scarlett smiled. We raise our son. We manage our estates. We argue about crop rotation and whether Grace should have a London season. We grow old together and scandalize our grandchildren with the story of how we met. That sounds perfect. In the months that followed, they did exactly that. Oliver divided his time between Ravenshire and Ashbourne, bringing modern farming techniques to both estates. He funded a school for tenant children. He forgave debts for families struggling through hard times. The villages that had once whispered about the Ice Duke began to speak of him with respect and even affection. Scarlett thrived in her role as Duchess. She knew the land, knew the people. She worked alongside Oliver as true partners, their meetings with stewards and tenants marked by collaborative decision-making rather than ducal decree. Grace bloomed as well. With financial security restored, she could focus on her art. Her paintings began to attract attention from galleries in London. Offers came for exhibitions, but she chose to stay at Ashbourne, at least for now, finding inspiration in the familiar landscapes of home. And James grew. From tiny, premature infant to healthy, laughing child. He had his father's grey eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. Oliver doted on him shamelessly, reading him poetry before he could understand words, carrying him through the estate to see livestock and crops, teaching him from the cradle that a title was a responsibility rather than a privilege. Society gossiped, of course. They counted months on fingers and whispered behind fans. But the gossip lacked teeth. Because Oliver and Scarlett faced it united. They did not hide their son's premature arrival. did not pretend their relationship had followed conventional paths. They simply lived their lives with such evident love and partnership that criticism seemed petty in comparison. 1 year after their wedding, on a crisp autumn morning, much like the one on which they had married, Scarlett found Oliver in the library. He sat at the desk where she had once read that devastating letter from creditors, where desperation had driven her to make an impossible choice. He was writing in a ledger, not accounts. A journal, she realized. "What are you writing?" she asked, settling into the chair across from him. "A record. For James when he is older, so he will understand where he comes from, how his parents met, what they built together." Oliver set down his pen. "I want him to know that sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances. That love can grow in the coldest soil if you are willing to tend it." Scarlett came around the desk and settled onto his lap. His arms came around her automatically, holding her close. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "The scandal we caused? The unconventional path?" "Never." Oliver's answer was immediate and fierce. "You gave me everything, Scarlett. A son, a purpose beyond accumulating wealth, a reason to be better than I was. I would weather 1,000 scandals to have what we have built." "I love you," Scarlett said simply. "I love you." Oliver kissed her, slow and deep. "Thank you." "For what?" "For walking into my castle during a storm, for refusing to beg, for negotiating with me as an equal, for giving me one night that became a lifetime." Scarlett smiled against his lips. "The pleasure, Your Grace, was entirely mutual." Outside, autumn leaves fell in showers of gold. Inside, a family built from desperation and choice celebrated another ordinary perfect day. And in the end, that was the greatest triumph of all. Not the restored estate, not the social acceptance, not even the love they had found. Simply this, the everyday joy of choosing each other, again and again and again, for as long as they both should live. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the darkest moments. Scarlett walked into a storm seeking mercy and found something far more precious. She discovered that vulnerability can be strength, that desperation can lead to transformation, and that the coldest hearts can melt when touched by genuine connection. What began as one desperate night became a lifetime of choosing each other, not once but every day. Perhaps that is what love truly is. Not a single grand gesture, but 1,000 small choices to stay, to grow, to tend the garden you planted together. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like. Subscribe for more stories of unexpected love. And comment below telling me where you are listening from. Your presence matters. Until the next story, remember, even the coldest winter eventually gives way to spring.